Call this meeting to order. House Standing Committee on Transportation. This time, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe.
Present in the room.
Representative Dixon.
Present in the room.
Representative Fleming.
Present in the annex.
Representative Hale.
Present in the room.
Representative Heverin.
Present in the room.
Representative Regina Huff.
Present in the room.
Representative Thomas Huff.
Present in the room.
Representative Lewis.
Present in the room.
Representative Maddox.
Present in the room.
Representative McCool. Representative McPherson.
Present in the room.
Representative Miller. Here. Representative Palumbo.
Here in my annex office.
Representative Santoro.
Here.
Representative Smith. Representative Stevenson.
Here in the room.
Representative Tackett Lafferty. Representative Thomas.
Here in the room.
Representative Westrom. Here in the room. Representative Wheatley.
Here.
Representative Bridges.
Here.
Chairman Upchurch.
Here. We do have a quorum. We're duly constituted to do business. We have two items on the agenda today. We're going to go out of order. So the first item on the agenda will be House Bill 465, Representative Myron Dossett. Just introduce yourself and your guests for the record. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate you letting me come before you this afternoon and present to you House Bill 465. The intent of the legislation authorizing the military unit license plates is to create an attractive picture license plate for the 7 most historically significant active military units in Kentucky, all based in Fort Campbell or Fort Knox. The active military service personnel and their families, our veterans and their families, are proud of their service to our nation, and this is a way that we can show our appreciation for their service. The plates will feature the unit logo, which Representative Thomas will be aware what we'll see there at Fort Campbell with the Screaming Eagle. It will feature the unit logo, and eligibility will be allowed to the soldiers and their spouses and dependent children with valid driver's license, Department of Defense civilian personnel who support the units, and their spouses and children as well. It will also include veterans of those units and their family members. As we move forward, other units in the Commonwealth may reach out and to us and consider to be included, but at this time they have not. And I'd like to take a moment and ask Brigadier General Stephen Bullard if he'd like to add some comments, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, members of the committee. Oh yes, thank you. This actually came about. We were down with Representative Walker Thomas in September at Fort Campbell, and several of the 100th Division soldiers said, "Hey, wouldn't our Screaming Eagle symbol look great on a military license plate? We'd buy that. We would love to see that." Tennessee's adopted them. Their plates are gorgeous. And so I briefed this at the Kentucky Commission on Military Affairs full meeting in December to great acclamation. And within a minute of my briefing it, I got an email from the Deputy Secretary of Transportation saying, "We love that. Let's do it." So what we decided to do is honor the 3 most distinguished units at both Fort Knox and Fort Campbell, which plus 5th Corps, which is our newest unit at Fort Knox. And 5th Corps has a distinguished lineage dating back to World War I. They are one of only 4 Corps commanders that are out at military bases around the state with a 3-star general command, and they manage our 8,500 soldiers over in Europe. So they're very involved in the Ukraine planning and all of that going on right now. And then real quickly, I'll just say, also down at Fort Campbell, you got the 101st Airborne Division. They're America's 911. Unbelievable history. We have the 5th Special Forces Group, which are heavily engaged in the Middle East and Southwest Asia. And we have the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the 160th SOAR, which is the aviation arm of U.S. Special Forces. They're called the Night Stalkers for very, very good reason. And the Fort Knox is the head of basically all management for the U.S. Army. So we want to honor Army Human Resources Command, which takes care of all the soldiers in the Army worldwide, the Army Recruiting Command, which brings them all in, and Army Cadet Command, which manages the officer selection process. And we think this is a home run, and everybody we've ever talked to is 100% in on this. We did look at the Kentucky National Guard as well. They already have a license plate, and so we do have one encompassing license plate. At some point, we might want to look at their major
Motion on the bill.
commands. Thank you.
All right, we do have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Looks like no one on the committee wants to tangle with the Brigadier General. All right, being no questions, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe,
Yes.
Representative Bridges,
Yes.
Representative Dixon,
Yes.
Representative Fleming,
Yes.
Representative Hale,
Yes.
Representative Hebron,
Yes.
Representative Regina Huff,
Yes.
Representative Thomas Huff,
Yes.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative McCool, Representative McPherson,
Yes.
Representative Miller, Representative Palumbo,
Yes.
Representative Santoro,
Yes.
Representative Smith, Representative Stevenson, Representative Tackett Lafferty, Representative Thomas,
Explain my vote.
Certainly.
In honor of all the 101st and Night Stalkers and 5th Special Forces and everyone down in Fort Campbell, I appreciate them letting me serve as their state representative for so many more years, but I'm passing the gavel off to Representative Dossett. In redistricting, he now has the soldiers of Fort Campbell, and he will do well with them. But that's a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Westrom, Representative Wheatley,
Yes.
Chairman Upchurch.
Yes. Bill does pass with favorable expression. Same should pass. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and excuse me, I want to offer my appreciation to General Ballard. It's been a pleasure working with him on this, and I just want to say thank you for your help as well.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for being
everyone.
here. All right. Next up is House Bill 447. Representative Dixon would like to inform the committee that we will be doing just informational only hearing on this bill today. We will not be holding a vote. Representative Dixon, introduce yourself and guests, and the floor will be yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative Jonathan Dixon from the 11th District, includes Henderson and Davis County, and I will let my guests introduce themselves.
Good morning, committee. My name is Kyle Lewis, representing the 3,000 Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association members in the state of Kentucky. I am also a pilot aircraft owner myself and have family roots right here in Kentucky. My grandfather hailed from Allen, Kentucky, near Prestonsburg, so just like to share that. And the deviled eggs in the cafeteria were wonderful. Just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Glad to have the opportunity to present House Bill 447 in front of you today. House Bill 447 is an important piece of legislation for the aviation community. Lowering the tax on private and commercial aircraft would bring aircraft back to Kentucky that are currently sitting across state lines. Our neighboring states just flat out beat us in drawing aircraft to their states. Those aircraft and those dollars that follow these aircraft are not landing in Kentucky. The objective of this bill is to correct that issue and to bring those aircraft back to Kentucky's general aviation airports, to create jobs, to continue the growth that we need to maintain our status as the leader in aviation and aerospace industries. House Bill 447 creates opportunities for pilots, maintenance techs, line workers, airport staff, economic growth, on-site business growth, construction jobs at airports, educational opportunities, hangar space, and the rental that comes with that. In addition, communities where GA airports are located are the drivers and direct benefactors of this legislation. The Federal Aviation Administration looks at landing counts and traffic reports as one of their factors for grants and improvement projects for local GA airports. As co-chair of the General Assembly's Bipartisan Aviation and Aerospace Caucus, I would like to report that this issue was one of many important topics that we discussed and was brought to our attention during the interim. Just this past October, the Kentucky Department of Aviation under the governor has outlined their goals, strategies, proposed goals, strategies, and tactics for 2021 and moving forward. This information can be found on the KDA's website under the department's proposed operational plan. This issue we are addressing in House Bill 447 can be found in that proposed operational plan under Strategy 4.2.1. It reads, eliminate tangible property tax for privately owned aircraft to encourage relocation of Kentucky-owned aircraft and from surrounding states. As you can see, this has had bipartisan support. I will like to note that we have received communication that this was only a proposed operational plan. Opposition to this bill has recently said that this is a tax break for private planes and jets, but what is left out of the comments is the facts. Single-engine, multi-engine planes, and as well as helicopters, account for 94% of aircraft based in Kentucky off the numbers provided by the Kentucky State Aviation System Plan under the KDA. Jets and turboprops only make up 6% of the aircraft that are in our state. General aviation airports in our Commonwealth contribute $50 million to local payrolls, countless jobs, opportunities for our local communities to grow, and revenue to our local communities. These dollars and opportunities are largely created by smaller multi-engine aircraft. Fiscally, the impact of House Bill 447 to the state is only $52,000 a year, and so minimal on the local tax level that the PBA Association has no issues with this legislation. So where are all these corporate jets everyone's talking about? Where are all the additional jobs and dollars that follow these aircraft? Like jet fuel tax, maintenance jobs, fees from local airports, hangars, hangar fees, local economic growth. Simply put, they're not here. Many of these aircraft are being parked and housed just beyond the borders of Kentucky, which is what this bill would help correct. Aviation and aerospace in Kentucky has and will continue to be a bipartisan effort to improve one of the fastest growing industries in our state. Kentucky needs to remain a leader, and that's exactly what the potential of this legislation would create. Mr. Chairman, I would like to give my guests the opportunity to give some remarks.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Go ahead.
I've already introduced myself, so I'll start into it. Chair Upchurch, Vice Chair Bridges, and the Transportation Committee members, thank you for your time today. AOPA is the world's largest aviation organization, representing nearly 330,000 aircraft owners, aviation enthusiasts, and pilots, and 3,000 reside right here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. AOPA is strongly urging that the language specific to House Bill 447 be adopted, as the positive impact to the airport ecosystem in Kentucky will be measurable in many ways. The United States has a unique airport system that includes over 5,000 public use airports. These airports in Kentucky, 54 public use general aviation airports, serve as critical infrastructure for aviation that include law enforcement, medical transportation, agricultural services, flight training, personal business travel, and recreation. Kentucky is also home to significant commercial, military, and air cargo operations at the 5 primary category airports. Aviation is second nature in the modern economy and is a vital asset to any state. House Bill 447 focuses on a tax that is very personal to our membership. This bill would repeal the personal property tax on not-for-hire aircraft. With current law, Kentucky is at a severe disadvantage to the neighboring states. Ohio, for example, does not have an annual personal property tax on aircraft, and registration fees there are at reasonable $15 per seat. Indiana also has no annual property tax on aircraft, and registration is a mere $10. Tennessee only taxes business category aircraft and no registration fee assessed. This tax environment promotes Kentucky aircraft owners to base and register their aircraft in the neighboring states. I personally know over a dozen individuals who reside in Kentucky and base their aircraft at Cincinnati's Lunken Municipal Airport. And I'm sure there are more that I just don't know. And you can follow that same landmark all the way down the Ohio River, all the way through Ohio and into West Virginia. And aircraft owners base their aircraft in a neighboring state because of the personal property tax in Kentucky. Applying that same standard to airports along every border with Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and according to the numbers, the Federal Aviation Administration data, Ohio reports 7,510 based aircraft, Indiana reports 4,992, Tennessee 5,951, and Kentucky only 2,620. Obviously, there is a reason why surrounding states have significantly more based aircraft. Airports in neighboring states along the Kentucky border are reaping those benefits of the based aircraft: fuel sales, hangar rents, maintenance, and the operations. These direct impact categories also relate to jobs. It takes skilled line workers to service aircraft on the ramps and the skilled mechanics to fix these and maintain the aircraft. General aviation is a significant upswing in operations, on average over 30% over the last 2 years. This increase in demand for flight training, both professional and personal, have resulted in demand for flight instructors, training aircraft, mechanics, airport facilities to store these aircraft. Aircraft ownership is also seeing an uptick. Finance houses have reported that sales have increased dramatically since 2020, and aircraft values have gone up as well. This increased demand has led airports to invest in expansion and growth opportunities, which we all know mean more ancillary jobs that may not be directly related to a specific aircraft or airport operation. Another benefit to increasing based aircraft is the ability to become more competitive for FAA grant dollars. The FAA Airport Improvement Plan, known as AIP, is the primary funding for airport infrastructure in the United States. It is competitive on every level. The FAA uses airport categories that directly correlate to funding levels. These categories, as defined in the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, also known as NIPIAS, uses a matrix of based aircraft numbers, types of based aircraft, number of operations, and population served by an airport to determine the specific priority and funding for a given airport. To put it simply, the more based aircraft and higher number of operations, it leads to more grant dollars. The grants are for very specific projects, which include pavement rehabilitation, airfield safety infrastructure, weather reporting, airfield lighting, property acquisitions, and other airport sustainability-focused projects. The legislative summary for House Bill 447 estimates that loss of approximately $50,000 in taxable revenue. By decreasing the cost of ownership, aircraft owners will be incentivized to base their aircraft in Kentucky. To that point, more based aircraft, as we stated before, mean more fuel sales, and that's the excise tax from those fuel sales, aircraft maintenance dollars, and other tangible expenses related to the operation and ownership of aircraft. If Kentucky were to become more competitive by removing the personal property tax on not-for-hire aircraft, there are benefits that will far outweigh the perceived loss of tax revenues. Kentucky's airport infrastructure will become more self-sustaining and experience growth by numbers, all very important to local economies that are tied to an airport's well-being. AOPA supports the language in House Bill 447 to repeal the property tax, and this is a mutual benefit to aircraft owners and to the state of Kentucky by becoming more competitive in a sector of aviation that is rapidly expanding. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members, for allowing us to discuss this today. A great man once told me, follow the data. And I think in this bill, that's what we're trying to do, is follow the data that's out there and what our state has to gain from legislation like this for our local airports and for our local people in the form of jobs, revenue, and the increased value. Mr. Chairman, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer those at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Dixon. I know since you filed this bill, there's been a lot of hyperbole in the press and social media about, we're robbing from children and, giving all the rich the tax breaks and everything. But I know it was reported that it was $52,000, and that's the fiscal statement that you have, $52,000 to the state.
Correct.
And then $2.5 million that would go to the the counties and cities across the state. What have you seen any documentation on that $2.5 million, or is that in fact correct, or?
I have not. At this point, I did make some calls this morning. That information came out yesterday on the $2.5 million. I did make some calls this morning to LRC staff, and they were communicating with the Revenue Department. But I have not at this time seen which counties would be, directly affected. Keep in mind, this tax that would be on the local level can be chosen by the county and is implemented. Each county is a little different. So, right. But I have not seen those figures and where they relate to and what part of the state.
Okay. Okay. Give us just a moment. We'll put you in the queue. So what you're saying, or it's your belief that if we do away with this tax, that the benefit to the state far outweighs the $2.5 million in tax revenue that we would get by hangar fees, jet fuel tax, or AV gas tax that the locals would be getting, hangar rentals. So, if you take $2.5 million out of divide that by 120 counties, it's a little over $20 million, or $20,000 per county. Yeah. And so it's your belief that by hangar rentals, maintenance that would come to the counties, tax through the gas, would far outweigh the $20,000 if you divided it by county, but it would far outweigh the $2.5 million statewide.
Yeah, that is correct, and that would be proven through when you have those planes move back into the state. Not only would you create construction jobs because they're gonna look for places to hangar these planes. Not only are you gonna have direct jobs on the airport, but then you're gonna have those revenues that come with those planes coming back in the form of construction jobs, materials purchased locally, activity economically in those general aviation airports. Yes, I wholeheartedly believe from the data that I think is national and that we have, currently in the state. I mean, I think this is something that could be a game changer for general aviation airports in the state.
Well, that's one of the things that we discussed, I think, back during the August, September, October meeting was an
aviation caucus.
Aviation. Mm-hmm. And, Kentucky, I think, is sitting on a diamond in the rough when it comes to aviation.
Yeah.
With our infrastructure that we have with the airports, municipal airports across the state, the carriers such as UPS, Amazon Prime, DHL, and then you've got the educational component of it with the post-secondary institutions through pilot training, through aviation maintenance, and so there is a lot of opportunities out there for Kentucky, and I'm excited about the future and what this bill could do as a piece to start moving us in the right direction when it comes to aviation. I'm going to open it up to committee members. We do have some in the queue.
Mr. Chairman, I will add real quick, you did bring up an important subject, and I think it's important to note, we covered it in our presentation a little, but the federal infrastructure package has money earmarked for airports. And those monies are handed out by the FAA based off of activity at that airport. And by the numbers that were just stated with the activity comparative to the states around us, it's going to be hard for Kentucky to compete for that money if we don't get those aircraft across state lines and back here. So that's an important piece of this. I wanted to take the time and the liberty, Mr. Chairman, thank you for noting that, it's a lot more than what meets the eye in this piece of legislation.
Okay, first on the list is Representative Tackett Lafferty. Did you have a question? Okay. Oh, okay. You're here.
You're here.
His name was Adrian Gibson. Oh, good. Yeah.
Can you turn your microphone on?
Just a brief comment. While we're talking about this subject, I would like to encourage any of the members who are interested in tax exemptions such as these to consider bills that we also have filed, for instance, to increase the pension income exclusions from $31,000 to $41,000.
Representative, let's try to keep it to the aviation bill.
Okay. All right. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Westrom.
I think this was an excellent presentation, and it might benefit all of us to get a copy of what you testified to. There's just so much to grasp in 10 minutes. I'm wondering, I know we have several small airports across the state of Kentucky. Are they privately built and privately owned, or are they publicly built, and if so, what is the funding source?
I can take that. Yeah, so the 54 airports I reference are public use airports, and the majority of those, if not all of them, are built with local, state, and federal grant dollars. The funding for those work, and these airports were built many, many years ago. Yes. It's rare that a new airport is built anywhere these days. But the FAA, for general aviation airports, will pay for 90% of a eligible project. And then some states will kick in, 50% of the local share of that matching grant. Ohio, for example, pays 50% of the local share. Most states do pay some of that. But there's also projects, especially hangars, and this is where it gets very important. There's a very high demand for hangars. Aircraft are, think of them, I don't want to use the term like boats, but they need to be, maintained. And a key to that maintaining of any aircraft is keeping it stored out of the weather, especially in a climate like the upper Midwest. So hangars are in high demand, and that goes for all categories of aircraft, from your two-seat fabric covered airplanes up to your business jets. Those dollars, federal dollars, it's a very low priority that hangars will be built. So airports are investing local dollars into hangars. And that's very important because it is a sustainability project. They make money off of hangars, and that goes directly back into the airport and the local community.
I thank you for your information. And I'm sure many members sitting on this committee are getting a lot of comments from the public that isn't as well educated as what you're sharing
Sure.
with us. And this may be a public relations deal that needs for the public to understand. That may take a little time, but I thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
That might help if some people in the press, namely one newspaper, might try to get some information beforehand. Representative Hevron.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry to get so excited about asking a question earlier.
We like it when you get excited.
I do. There's a lot to get excited about around here. Thanks so much, Representative Dixon, for bringing this, and I appreciate your guest coming today, too. I remember hearing about this during the interim, and it really had true bipartisan support whenever you brought this to us. But I do have one question for you. General aviation airports, I think, are very important, especially to our local communities. And so do you know what the impact would be, what this would have for aviation education programs at local general aviation airports?
Yes, Representative, thank you for the question. This would be a great driver for those education programs. With the increased revenue that moving those planes and that busyness that would happen at those general aviation airports would drive that educational component on a local level. And I'll give you an example. Right now, across the state, there are many high schools that are looking at maintenance programs and pilot programs to add to their vocational programs as an addition. And so keeping these general aviation airports alive and vibrant is a key component for those programs, for us to capture those children at a young age, get them into those educational programs. Those could be future pilots, mechanics, and individuals that may work in aerospace. But that's a key component, and I think that's a great question because it's something that's very important to bills like this that drive those airplanes back home. So.
I appreciate that, Representative. I think something that we're always, in Frankfort, we always have this conversation how things are politically divided. But I think really the ones of us here actually recognize that it's more of a rural-urban divide. And, since we've talked about having tax reform conversations this session, to me, I'm understanding that this is removing a tax and kind of moving towards that conversation of true tax reform here in the Commonwealth. But I do, hearing about general aviations, I think those are really big things for rural areas. We don't all have the economic drivers such as international airports in our districts, or even national airports. And so I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Chairman, thank you for allowing us to have this conversation. And like I said, I'm disappointed that it didn't have bipartisan support as it did in the interim. But I understand that sometimes messages get a little confused along the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had a question to the gentleman, particularly, I guess, the AOPA representative. Could you give me a breakdown of the type within within Kentucky in terms of type of aircraft? Obviously, you got the 151, you got the singles, you got the twins, you have fixed wings, you got rotor and all that stuff. Can you give me a breakdown of that?
I'd be happy to provide that. I would have to do some research, to be quite honest, to break that down by aircraft type. But I think 6% of the aircraft registered in the state currently are of the business jet category, which would be turbine, turboprop, and above. I do have a breakdown, if you wanted it again, from the representative's testimony. Multi-engine aircraft, so that's your twin-engine small aircraft, 11%. Helicopter is 3%. Single engine, which is anything from a Piper Cub, which is the small two-seat fabric airplane, up to a Cirrus, or even a Piper Malibu, or Piper Meridian turboprop, TBM, that sort of thing, is at 78%. But if you would like a breakdown of aircraft type, I'm sure I could get that through FAA data and send that to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Do you know what the capacity in terms of rental space is? I know Bowman is usually booked up as a waiting list. Can you give me a feel what's going on throughout the state in terms of capacity for hangar space?
Yeah, I can tell you that nearly every airport, and this is true across the country right now, every airport is booked on hangar space. They're being built as fast as they can be built, with the local dollars and some with, grant dollars that are eligible. For example, Cincinnati-Lunken Airport that I mentioned earlier, even though it's in Ohio, their waiting list is about 10 years out on average. And that's why folks from Kentucky are, going to Ohio. They find an open hangar space and they'll register and base their aircraft in Ohio. There's some other benefits to that as well. If they would sell the aircraft to another Ohio resident, there's no sales tax on that sale. So there's some other benefits there specific to Ohio.
So I guess let me just get down more of the weeds. And I appreciate the example, but is there any data available that really shows, all right, we've got X number of hangars that are there throughout the Commonwealth at X, but we have Y as a number on the waiting list. And then take that a step further, where are they from a geographical standpoint? And then what does it take to have those hangars built? And then the next step is what's the economic impact from that? Do you have any analysis or any perspective on that?
Yeah, Representative Fleming, thanks for the question. I'll take that portion of it. There actually was a study put out, I believe it, and I don't want to misquote, but I'm going to say 15, 16, 17 that was put out that covers some of the information you're asking for. There was also an additional survey or study, excuse me. I'm going to reference, when was that study done for? Yeah.
I think it was May 17th.
So in 17, there was a study done that's pretty extensive that dives into each airport location and where all that information lies.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I do have that. There is some gaps within that report, but it is comprehensive and takes a very high altitude and also gets in the weeds, particularly when it comes to workforce development in terms of how the 600 plus businesses that feed into this industry that generate, I don't know, like 10 or $11 billion in doing that. So I was just curious, and I mean, I'm just trying to go through the process in terms of looking things down, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. If you're looking at $52 million or $52,000 and 2.5, and going back to the chairman says, if you go through a pro forma, what does that mean in terms of return, and then you can look at that 3, 4, or 5 years down the road to see exactly what's up with that. So that's where I was coming from with that.
Sure. If I could jump in, just if you want to know what it takes to construct a hangar these days, obviously for any public use airport that accepts federal grant dollars, that project would need to be on what's called the airport layout plan. And that's a plan that's approved by, in some cases, state DOTs and the FAA. And once that structure is on the airport layout plan, then local money can be invested into a hangar project. There's also a method that allows a private citizen to lease land on a public use airport for a certain term. The FAA doesn't like to see super long-term leases because of grant assurances, but they actually enjoy that private investment being brought onto the airport. And these are your private aircraft owner to your businesses that will construct a hangar on leased land and build the hangar under their own finances. And then they purchase fuel from the airport and so forth. So there's a couple different methods to the hangars, but there are some, I won't say roadblocks, but just some hurdles to overcome with environmental studies and things like that. Just go through the federal planning process.
All right, we've got 3 more folks in the queue. Representative Fleming, are you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative McPherson.
Yes, just a couple of comments, maybe. So I've got a nephew that started out in a high school program in a rural area that had his solo pilot license before he entered EKU and was able to finish EKU in 3.5 years and now is gainfully employed and flying and looking at his future. So I think that's a wonderful program. I think this bill particularly removes some barriers so that we can, you never know what one pilot in one rural community can do to mentor 2 or 3 people. And 2 or 3 people stay in that community and that airport flourishes because of it. We're always looking at building infrastructure, building roads, building things in. We already have these airports here. We just need to expand them. We need to remove all the barriers, get back to a usage tax instead of taxing each individual. The usage tax on these, but it's so important for these small communities, these rural communities. You just never know how important it is for one person to come in and to get involved, and it just changes the whole outlook. So I appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also appreciate bringing this and having it for discussion here this first time because you're right, the hyperbole has gotten maybe out of hand here, and I appreciate our conversation right before the meeting here. And a lot of what was going to ask about, Representative Fleming touched on. I was doing some quick numbers with there's 2,400 plus aircraft in the state, evidently, and the 2.5 million plus the 52,000 comes out to about a little over $1,000 per aircraft in taxes, which doesn't seem to me to be that much of a disincentive to be in Kentucky. There's so many other factors, related to hangar space and related to all the other factors that why anybody will be at a particular airport. As far as I go by literally a couple hundred times this summer. I went by Cincinnati Lunken Airport and saw that they had some aircraft inside and some outside. And I wondered the same thing about why were they there and why were some within the hangars and some are not. And I'm sure it does depend on the availability, and that is where we're looking to do something about here. I understand that, but also recognizing $2.5 million to local communities, which while there could be some incentive for individuals who would get inspired by some of the work done locally, that's obviously it's 54 communities and 2.5 million. You can just do that math, and that's going to be some loss of dollars there. And again, very important what I think was Representative Fleming's analysis of the numbers. And I have one last suggestion related to this. I would poll simply the out-of-state that we're aware of, the out-of-state owners of aircraft, to ask what is their likelihood of they're returning to the state. And polls are really easy to do anymore, so you can do it fairly cheaply. And if you get those addresses, you can give us an idea and come back with that information. That would be helpful. That would give us an idea of what kind of incentive we really can provide to lure them back into the state, because we do, just like our veterans, we want to make aviation the prime reason why people will come to Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wheatley. And I will say there have been several reach out, owners of aircraft that have said they are really supportive of this bill and they would be looking to move them back. So that poll's a great idea, because I think it would be very substantial how many would be willing to return to Kentucky.
Thank you.
Last up is Representative Stevenson. Save the best for last, maybe.
That's right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to applaud you for deciding to have discussion only today. There has been a lot of heartburn over this bill out there. $2.5 million may not seem like a lot of money to people who own a plane, but to me and a lot of the constituents I've heard from, it gives them significant pause. And knowing that that's money, in our schools, in our cities, in our counties, especially when, a lot of counties, are begging for dollars, it's worrisome. So if there is data and there's some hard numbers and some evidence-based projections that you could get to us about how this money would be replaced or even surpassed, I think that would be really helpful for a lot of us and a lot of our constituents who are, worrying a little bit about this bill. I know that it's been out there and it's been on social media. Last week we cut unemployment, and then this week it seems like we're going to cut taxes for people who are really wealthy and have a plane. So I just think that would be super helpful if we could get some of those hard numbers in front of us. So if you could provide that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative.
If I could, I just like, since we are in a public forum, maybe dispel some of the perception issues on aircraft ownership. Yes, airplanes are to some a hobby, for rich people. I will beg to differ, because I represent a lot of almost all of the aircraft owners. AOPA has 90% of all the aircraft owners in the United States as members. They come from all walks of life: school teachers, farmers, doctors, lawyers, everybody. And it's an interest in aviation is what drives it. Also, AOPA, we have a high school STEM program. In fact, it's a program accredited by the state of Kentucky. That UPS down in Louisville has definitely had a hand in helping further along. It's a 4-year high school program, and the curriculum itself is free to any school district. If any of you are interested, I'd be happy to tell you more about it. That's not my specialty, but I want to get it out there that AOPA is pushing a STEM curriculum because of the demand in the aviation sector. And it's not just manned aircraft. The UAS, the unmanned, is becoming a top priority very quickly, not just within the FAA, but within state DOTs, planning ahead for these unmanned vehicles. And airports are at the very center of that conversation. And the infrastructure required for these new vehicles, that's what they are. So, again, I can't underscore enough, but aircraft ownership comes in a lot of varieties. A lot of aircraft ownership is partnerships where 2 or 3 people may go in and purchase an airplane. Flying clubs, that's what they are. They're recreational use flying clubs, and they're used for personal business, personal travel, that sort of thing. So there are rich people that have airplanes, yes. But there's a higher majority of your everyday folks that enjoy aviation as a hobby and for the recreation and personal business travel that it allows. So just wanted to kind of get that out there. Thank you.
But those folks aren't here, and that's what this bill is designed to do, is draw those airplanes back.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think, Representative Smith, did you have something?
Just a statement, Mr. Chairman and Representative Dixon, thank you for looking into this. We have 2 great airports in my region, with Corbin, London, and with Williamsburg, both doing excellent job in growth and trying to expand. The way I'm looking at this bill, and you can correct me, I'm not looking at it as giving a tax advantage to the rich or a tax advantage to anybody or a tax break. I'm actually looking at it as to incentivize the game that has had to be played over the past decades on trying to keep a Learjet or a large, we're not talking about the pipes or the smaller planes. I think we're talking about more getting into the Learjet, the higher expense jets. I want them in my area because that's the investors in my area. That's the people with means. A corporation that comes in that looks in our area at our industrial park, they may not ask us about it, but I guarantee you they've looked to see about air transit, how they get their plane into here when they need to bring their corporate people in. Whether we want to call them the wealthy and we don't have to deal with them, I want to deal with them in my area, and I appreciate what you're trying to do here. And if it ends up being a hard sell and a vote on the floor, if you could look at regionalizing and giving local governments the opportunity to exempt, I'd appreciate that, to at least not kill the game in our area where we're trying to grow. Both our airports can use this for growth, and both of them are trying to expand. And so I appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I think I'm on the right path. This is as economic development also, and to bringing those planes back because they're sitting in Knoxville in my area, and so they want to come back. They want to be located there, and so again, I want to encourage the major corporations of the world to come into Eastern Kentucky, have access to an airport, and give incentives for them to be there. And so I appreciate what you're trying to do here.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Smith. And I think I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, if you allow, say something real quick. You brought up an interesting point. And, you know, we had a presentation this summer that I attended that talked about drones and transport drones. And when you talk about accessibility for jobs and for individuals to get to jobs in East Kentucky and across this state, your airports are going to become, in the next 50 years, the gateways to those opportunities. Not just in the form of flying on a jet or an airplane. We're talking drones that will pick 6-8 people up and move them to different locations. And it sounds like crazy talk, but it's stuff that's advancing quickly in the aviation and field. And so this is laying the groundwork to get the infrastructure, the planes, the investments, the federal funding dollars, all of the things that go together to set our state up for success for aviation from now and into the future for our citizens, for our airports, and for our communities. So thank you for that statement.
Thank you for the presentation. Old apple farmer told me one time, sometimes you got to prune the trees back so you get new growth and more apples. So this is a pretty good way to start, looks like.
Yeah.
That is it for the on the bills. We do have some regulations before us, but first I would turn it over to Representative Huff. She has a introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to introduce, we have a guest today from my district, Paul David Steele. Paul was very instrumental in us gaining our local airport. I know he worked tirelessly for that to happen, and it has had a huge impact in our district. So I hope we can look at this as an economic driver, and I know we've used AirVac there in Whitley County, so I hope that we can pass this and other legislation in support of aviation, particularly in rural Kentucky. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Paul.
All right, next up we have consideration of some referred administrative regulations. We have someone from the cabinet. Are you on Zoom?
Chairman at Church, this is Carlos Cassidy.
All right.
Executive Director of the Kentucky Motor Vehicle Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to answer any questions of representatives regarding our repromulgation of these regs. These regs have been in existence for a number of years and been utilized by the commission. And it was Governor Matthew Bevin's red tape initiative that brings us before you to repromulgate today.
Okay. Are there any questions of any of the members of the committee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. There being no further business to come before the committee, next week we will let you know if we are in fact meeting, because Monday is a holiday, so we'll get communication to you. We do now stand adjourned.